Ominous.
Hi guys, it's Amanda. Today, I'm going to be giving my boyfriend a tattoo. Kind of. This is actually something that was sent to me by my dad, so it's not a sponsored video, but I will link this product down below. It's called Inkbox, and this is their Freehand Pro Kit. Basically, you can create your own temporary tattoo design, and it lasts about 1 to 2 weeks. And today, my willing participant is going to let me try this out on him. So thanks for being a good sport.
I'm excited.
Yes, I'm excited as well. We have the tattoo designs already prepped, so I'm going to show you a little bit about that process. And then we have to get into preparing the area.
I'd like to apologize for my white legs, but here we go.
All right, YouTube, here we go. Actually, I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself here. First, I want to show you what is in the Freehand Pro Kit, just in case you end up wanting to order this for yourself. So the kit includes a little pamphlet of instructions, a little spare nib kit. These have different sizes and they all have little rubber stoppers. The nibs are metal and they're pretty durable actually, and they feel like they're really well made and would last a very long time. Then we have 2 bottles of quote-unquote ink. We have the freehand ink, which is in this black bottle and is the darker color. Then we have the shading ink, which is in this gray bottle here. Then we have these 2 nozzles that attach to the bottles of ink, and these actually have nibs already inside of them, so you have an extra pair as well. There's also this skin safe ink pen that I didn't end up using. Underneath the box, we have a pair of latex gloves, very fun. I wore them for the first tattoo, did not wear them for the second, and it really wasn't a problem. There's this spare nib kit that my dad bought me, and I think he also bought this skincare lotion, not really necessary. And then we have the transfer paper and pencil. Inkbox also has this book of 50 flash designs. These are some of their most popular designs, and they're really convenient to just readily transfer and then ink on yourself because they already have the image mirrored. However, we're not going to be using pre-made designs today. We are going to be using designs that I made myself specifically for my boyfriend, and I'm going to show you a little bit more of that design process now. So when trying to recruit my boyfriend to do this video with me, I really wanted to get a sense of what sort of tattoo he would actually be interested in getting. And the 2 ideas that came to mind was a hexagon tattoo design and then a design incorporating an image that he has on a ring. And it's sort of this Native American symbol, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about these tattoos himself, but I also wanted to include a little bit of the design process in Procreate so you could see sort of how I did this. You can see for each of these tattoo designs, it's a lot of trial and error and just experimenting with different things. I definitely took direction from my boyfriend for finding out what he actually wanted to be included in the design, and then I just sort of messed around with some things. I also pulled some inspiration from Google and just tried to get some ideas because tattoo design is not really something I do all that often. Once the tattoos were designed and I was happy with the outcome, I mirrored the image in Procreate and then sent it over to my printer. Mirroring the image is particularly important, not so much for this first design that you see me printing here because it's pretty symmetrical, but for the other design, you want it to be the mirror image of how you actually want it to be on the skin. I printed out a few different sizes just so I could give my boyfriend the option of like what size would be the best for the area that he wanted. Next is to transfer the tattoo designs, and this is where the directions included in the Inkbox kit were not very clear at all. How you see me doing it here is not actually how I would recommend doing it. I would say you want to make these lines as dark and bold as possible. Do not be gentle, do not be fragile. You might tear the paper in some places, but really you want these lines to be dark and bold. Otherwise, it will not transfer properly. So I actually ended up having to mess with this a few different times to get it right, which is frustrating. So hopefully I can save you that frustration by just telling you to go over your lines and make sure they're really dark and clear to begin with. Now on to that shaving footage I promised. This is actually just kind of satisfying, honestly.
You say so.
I don't know about you guys, but for me personally, this was my favorite part of this entire video. Once the area was shaved, I made sure that I had enough space to transfer the design, and then I wiped down the area with rubbing alcohol just to remove any excess oil. Okay, so here I have our first design that we're gonna do. This is on the transfer paper with their special pencil, and from what I understand, I'm supposed to just wet the skin, put this on there, rub it, and then when I peel it away, the design should be on there. That seems strange to me, but we're gonna try it. We're gonna have a little bit of faith. We're just gonna see. So
that's what you want to hear when you're getting a tattoo is, I haven't done much research and we're just gonna have faith.
I have a master's degree and I have full faith in myself that this is just gonna work, so.
I do too.
Thanks.
Big reveal.
I don't think
anything
works.
happened.
Yeah, it barely did anything. Okay, attempt number 2 at transferring the design. I darkened the lines on this design a little bit more, so hopefully we get a better outline. Let's see.
Tiny bit.
Tiny bit. I'm gonna kind of like let it sit.
Yeah, sit for a minute. Keep kind of pressing and rubbing. Do you want me to talk about it?
Yeah.
So this one is based off of a ring that I've had for a very long time. I think 8 years, because it was actually the design on my high school graduation ring. And I wish I could tell you what language it came from, but how it was explained to me was that it was a combination of symbols for wind and water, and therefore combining to make thunderstorm. And so this ring is pretty important to me and very special, and as I've gotten older it's started to fit a little less well, and so rather than wearing it on my hand, I thought I might want to carry it in a more permanent way with me, and that's what we've got now, and it will be placed opposite of the geometric design to keep the balance that I find very important, but then as a more artistic design it is more aligned with the left side brain.
Yeah, so in designing this one, because in the ring it is very geometric, and so I wanted to incorporate those like organic elements into it with the more organic lines and shapes, and then so I created this kind of image of like a storm kind of going over a sea to kind of portray that meaning like Keith explained. This, I think, of the two was the more challenging design for me because I didn't want it to necessarily look like a tribal tattoo, and I didn't necessarily want to make it look like overly intricate, because some of my initial designs were a little bit more feminine or just weren't as clear to communicate because the shape itself is kind of restricted in where you can put those elements. So this, I think, of the two is the more challenging design. Okay, let's see.
Let's see the moment of truth.
Oh, okay. Oh, I think we have progress. Okay, so the two things that I think are really key that it doesn't explain on the like 10 words or less directions, make your outlines pretty bold, and then I think you want to like leave the transfer paper on there and kind of like press the lines down for probably like about a minute. I think we did that, so that worked a lot better. Let's do this.
Everything you said they already knew, more or less.
Well, here's something that you didn't know. 2 of those special atomic bombs haven't gone off.
Okay, so design number 1 is done. I think that only took about 10 minutes.
Yeah.
So my initial thoughts is that the ink flows really, really well through the tip. I actually didn't end up changing the tip either. It just kind of felt like it was going to take longer to stop and then change it out, so I kind of just kept going. And I tried to get the dark areas as even as possible. It is kind of like a goopy gel consistency, so it doesn't always spread as easily, but that's obviously not what you want when you're doing those fine lines. So I think it kind of works pretty well. This has to stay and sit like this for at least an hour before we can wash it off. And after that, it's probably gonna be pretty anticlimactic because then it's gonna take about 24 to 36 hours to fully develop. But while we're waiting on this side to dry, let's go ahead and move on to the next side. Okay, we're back to attempting the hexagon design. And I wanted to mention briefly, if you are doing the freehand designs yourself, although it doesn't particularly matter with this design, you want to make sure that you print it out in the reverse orientation that you want to have it on the skin. And that way when you are tracing it, it is in the correct orientation when you put it on the skin. So I wanted to mention that. And then the other kind of unique aspect about this design, which we're gonna, I think, kind of problem solve as we go, is the fact that there are technically 3 shades involved in this design, and there are 2 in this box. So I have some ideas of how I'm going to combat that, because the way that this design works is that the negative space, or I guess the white sort of outlines, are going to be your legs.
Very white legs.
Your white legs. And then we have, of course, the black as the darkest shade, and then we have sort of like a medium gray and a light gray. How I think I'm going to troubleshoot this is to sort of take advantage of the amount of time that the ink sits on the skin before you wash it off, and do the lightest parts of the design with the shading ink last. That way they spend the least amount of time on the skin, and hopefully will end up being a lighter tone compared to the medium gray. That being said, if the medium gray and the light gray essentially look the same, I think the design will still read pretty well. I just want to try and like make that a little bit more clearer. More clear. I have a master's degree.
Good evening, everyone. Highlights of the news this Thursday. Traffic accident. A Beaver County man is being held for murder. And more later.
While I'm doing this, do you want to explain to the people of the internet why we're doing this design?
Sure. So this will be the first of 2 designs. I guess the first thing I should touch on is how important symmetry is going to be for me. So this one, going on my right leg, is being tied to the right brain, basically. So more analytical, which gives us the hexagonal design. So I like the idea of geometry being tied to the analytical right side brain, and therefore on the right side of my body. So why a hexagon? So Amanda's favorite number is 3. Mine is 2. Again, for symmetry and being even. So those two combined gives us a hexagon, which is a good kind of superposition, I think, of two numbers that we both like. It is also somewhat tied to my field in engineering. Hex keys and those bolts with hex keys are very important in my work. So that kind of drove the overall shape. And then Amanda did a great job adapting other things that she knows I like. So around the ring we have triangles, which make up different triforces, which I love the Legend of Zelda games. So that was really cool that she was able to work that in. And then in the center we'll have a kind of isometric view of a cube. So kind of all tying together geometry, video games that I like, and then the two of us together encompassing the whole. Would you say that this design has been harder to implement?
Yes.
The first one was harder to design. This one's harder to harder to do.
This design, it's just harder to like maintain the steady motion.
Yeah.
Like with the other design, there were like breaks in the design. I could like rest my wrist, I could go at a different angle, but because these are all very straight lines, like there's one way to get that like angle. So it's a little harder to like maintain the negative space. We were talking about like leaving this center of like the Triforce shape just blank, because I think it will still more or less read the same. So making like little adaptations like that as we go for the sake of like the design making sense, because having to now get in there and do another triangle with a very similar color is probably just gonna wash it out. So those were things that like in the design phase I didn't think about because I don't usually design tattoos, but now while implementing it we can kind of figure out like, okay, here's what didn't make sense in the design, even though they looked cool. Okay, so here's what the first design is looking like. I did go over the outside lines and just kind of go over the top of the black. When we were working on the other design, this was like mostly dry and it almost looks like a film sitting on top of the skin. Keith, you had kind of said like you noticed like when you move and you flex, it kind of like was wrinkling with the skin, which kind of is just an indication that it's dry. What does it feel like on the skin?
I can't even tell it's there.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting. And the application process, was it like pretty comfortable?
Yeah, it's totally fine. Initially when you put the first couple lines down, I think you were using a little bit more pressure. Kind of like getting poked a little bit, but after I mentioned that, it was totally fine.
Yeah, I think something to note, especially if you're doing this on another person, is that these are metal. So they're gonna be durable, but they are kind of scratchy. Like, it's obviously a blunt needle, so it's not going to pierce the skin unless you're like really trying to hurt somebody, which I do not recommend. But it is going to have kind of a scratchy feeling on there. So definitely be careful if you're not doing this on yourself and you can't like tell how hard you're pushing. Okay, and here is design number 2. It is not 100% done yet because we are going to give this about 30 minutes head start drying before we go in with the gray and fill in the top of the square or the cube. I will say, like, in both of these bottles, I think I have about half of the black ink left. So, you know, you can definitely do a few tattoos with this, even though both of these designs included a lot of black. I still have some left if I want to do more. And then I think Inkbox says the ink has a shelf life of about 6 months. So as long as you keep the little airtight seal on here, you can store it and reuse it multiple times, which is cool. So this has been sitting there for almost about an hour now, right?
Yeah.
So you can see it is kind of starting to even like lift off the skin. I think that's supposed to happen. Almost like completely in these areas. And from what I understand, when you take this off, it's not supposed to look like a whole lot really happened. And then over time, it's going to develop and darken in pigmentation, sort of like a henna tattoo. I think that's where like this technology and idea really comes from. But I wanted to give you guys sort of a look of what it looks like dried, because it looks kind of weird. Feels kind of weird too. Does it feel like tight on the skin at all?
No, still I can't even tell it's there.
Okay. And then on the other side, we just did the top of the cube, and I just did kind of like a quick light layer, and hopefully that will result in a lighter color overall. We're gonna give it probably only about 30 minutes to sit on the skin, and then it just recommends that you wash it off with soapy water. So we'll see how it turns out. Okay, let's see it. Ta-da! Okay, so this is it all washed off. Let's see the other side. Okay, so this side, you were just saying it has been on a little bit longer, so the pigment's slightly darker, but you can tell, like, kind of underwhelming, right? Like, you just kind of wash it off and it basically looks like nothing is there. So it'll be interesting to see how this develops over the next 24 to 36 hours, and how dark it gets. It's weird because like this one, it almost looks like the pigment is like brown or like warmer in hue than the black ink that's in the bottle. So we'll see about that. But I mean, I can tell like all the lines are there on this one. Looks pretty good. So this one, noticeably lighter. And I can't really even tell right now like where the shading ink was. I can really only see where the black ink was. Right? Can you see?
No, not at all.
So we'll see how this one develops. I think this one in general was more experimental than the other one. But we'll check back in tomorrow, right?
Looking forward to it.
All right. Put those away. Hi guys, it's been a couple of days since I filmed myself giving Keith a tattoo, and I wanted to check in and wrap up the video. First, I want to show you how the tattoos look. It's been 4 days since the initial application, so here's how they're looking now. So this is the geometric tattoo that we did. This really hasn't changed much since it was,
I'd say 24 hours in.
Yeah, so it really pretty much looks exactly the same as it did after the initial 24 hours as it does right now.
Yeah, and one thing I would note is that the experiment on this part here, where we washed the gray off early to see if it would do a light color, did absolutely nothing, as far as I can tell.
Yeah, so that's a good point. So just to remind everybody, the majority of this tattoo is using just the regular black ink, and then the square here and then the triangles in between are done using the shading ink, which you can see is significantly lighter. Okay, let's see the other one. Okay, and then this is the other one. This one I think held up really, really well. Obviously, most of it is visible because it is using just the black ink. And again, I really don't think this one has changed very much.
Nope,
since,
again, from about 24 hours in.
Yeah, it looks exactly the same. And I think it looks, it like right away, this one developed a lot like faster, I think.
Well, it was on my skin a lot longer too. So I think that
we did
could
this
have
one
something to do
first.
with it.
Yeah, so that is how they're looking. I wanted to give my initial impressions on this temporary tattoo kit. I wanted to get your initial impressions on it as well. I think for me, the one thing that I was really surprised by was how gray the overall color was. It definitely did not appear like a true rich black. It has some translucency to it, so it doesn't look like you just got a fresh new tattoo. It looks like a tattoo that you've probably had for a decade. So that is something to be mindful of if you're really trying to like trick your friends into thinking you just impulsively got a tattoo. This probably isn't going to trick them. And I was kind of disappointed in the shading ink. I don't really think it did very much. I definitely don't think it was as impactful as I would have initially thought, or as impactful as I would have liked. I don't know about you.
I think there's some experimenting we could do with maybe leaving it on a lot longer, like a couple hours, rather than only the single hour that we tried, which was what they recommended.
So that also reminds me of another point I wanted to bring up. I don't feel like there is a lot of directions with this kit. I feel like it is sort of self-explanatory, but the thing with like transferring the tattoo design was a little bit tricky. It wasn't as foolproof as they kind of made it seem on the 3-step directions.
Yeah, it almost like they assume that you're gonna have to do a little bit of trial and error, even if they provide instructions, so I give details. It's kind of a weird attitude to have towards a direction.
It is. And so I was a little frustrated with the transferring process and just kind of the overall like directions that were laid out. I feel like if there was a little bit more time and attention into walking people through step by step, you would have maybe better outcomes or more consistent outcomes when it comes to like getting the tattoos exactly the way that you want them to look. I do feel like overall it was a super user-friendly kit in terms of like holding it in my hand and squeezing out the ink. It was very much like doing like a henna tattoo, which I've done before. It wasn't all that different, and in fact I felt like I had maybe even more control because the nibs were really sturdy and you had the size variety as well, which I didn't really utilize all that much because it was just kind of a pain to like switch them out midway through. And I actually had a significant amount of ink left. So I think we used about half the bottle of the black ink, which is still enough to do 2 other pretty decent sized tattoos. And I have a lot of the shading ink left. But again, I don't know how much I'll really be using that.
I mean, it's a temporary tattoo. It's pretty fun.
Yeah, and I think I enjoyed kind of seeing how it developed over the first 24 hours. I will put some pictures up that we took, I think, about 3 hours after we initially did the tattoo, and then about 8 hours, and then 24 hours, and then after that it really didn't change all that much. So let's just briefly talk about price, because I feel like that's going to be a really big factor in whether you take the plunge and get this or not. The Freehand Inking Pro Kit retails for $49 US. So again, this was gifted to me by my dad. It wasn't sponsored, so they're not sending this to me. But frankly, I do feel like that's a little bit expensive. Kind of browsing just on the website in general, a lot of the Inkbox items, they sell like pre-made temporary tattoo designs as well. They're pretty pricey. I don't think you're really going to find anything less than $10 on the website. I will say one thing that is nice is you can buy the individual components of this kit separately as well. So you don't necessarily have to buy the transfer paper and the gloves and all the little other accessories that you may not even use. I didn't even use the skin safe pen. So if I didn't want to spend the extra money on the bundle, I could literally just buy the ink and maybe the freehand tip kit, and I would pretty much be good to go, and you could maybe save a little bit of money that way. But for the kit, while it is all of the items that you need, I don't really think the directions are there, and I think $50 is a lot for maybe only a couple of times using it and having fun.
So knowing now that you can buy the components separately, I think that might be the way to go. My initial thoughts are that if you are thinking about getting a tattoo and you're not sure exactly how it's going to look, you know, transferred from your design to, you know, a curved arm or torso or something like that, this would be a great way to test it out. That would be a lot cheaper than getting a tattoo that didn't work the way you intended. So I think if you're using it with that in mind, then it would be great. A great way to kind of troubleshoot without having a permanent tattoo. if you're just doing it because you think it might be a fun way to do like a weekend like we did, I think buying the components individually might be the way to go.
Yeah.
Still a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. I had a good time being your canvas.
Yeah, I agree. I had a really good time too, and I think for you it was well worth it because you did get to try out those potential tattoos in the future, and you got to walk through the process of like designing them with me and like communicating what you want, what you like, what you don't like in a design. So that was kind of more worth it for you, but you're right, absolutely. Like I think $50 just for like something to try out for one weekend and then it washes off in 2 weeks, probably not going to be worth it for most of you. But you can definitely go in and customize what you buy. And then if you run out of just the black ink, you can buy more of that individually as well. It is still kind of pricey. I think the half-ounce bottle is like 20 bucks. So I'm sure the kit ultimately is a better value if you end up needing multiple items. But for me, I think if I was going to do this again, I would just go in and buy the ink and call it good. Because the other thing I want to mention is that this flash book of the 50 designs is not part of the kit. I thought it was originally, but when I looked online, this is a separate $15 purchase for some pretty much just glorified clip art. They're cool, and they do like reverse them for you already, which makes transferring easier, but like you could do this yourself, and you can customize the sizes better if you just have a printer at home that you can find a Google image that you really like, print it out the size that you want, mirror the image, and then do this yourself. Ultimately, I think this is not worth it, but the kit is still pretty cool, and I think the brand is cool, what they're doing is cool, and I had fun.
I did too.
Yeah, you were a good sport. So that's kind of it. That's kind of my thoughts on this. It's sort of a unofficial review video of the Inkbox Freehand Pro Kit. Yes. Did you have anything else that you wanted to say? Okay.
No, that's it.
All right. Well, thank you guys for watching. I appreciate you being here, and I will see you on the internet.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.